Will McCallum, s ktorým sa chvíľočku spojím, je riaditeľom Greenpeace práve pre otázky oceánov a rovnako je aj hovorcom v kampani, ktorá bojuje za, alebo respektíve proti používaniu plastov, ktoré vidíme a používame takmer každý deň. Čo je zaujímavé, že sa nedávno vrátil z Antarktídy, kde bol na expedícii a tam skúmal práve vplyv plastov na život divokých zvierat a na to, akým spôsobom sa mikroplasty dostávajú do častí Zeme, kde každý z nás nedovidí. Je rovnako aj autorom knižky Ako sa zbaviť plastov, ktorá je takým sprievodcom, čo by sme mohli urobiť, aby tie informácie, ktoré vidíme aj na Facebooku a na sociálnych sieťach, sme mohli nejakým spôsobom ovplyvniť. Ja teda dúfam, že sa už s Willom McCallumom môžem počuť alebo aj vidieť. Hi.
Hi, Will.
Hi.
Hi, Will. How are you?
Yeah, all right. How are you?
Thank you. So hopefully everything works well. And I just said very briefly about you, what you have been doing, and what is our topic for today. And thank you very much for joining us during this conference. And if you're ready, you have 15 minutes for your speech or presentation, and then we will have another 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So if you're ready, let's get started. Time is yours.
Great. I'm going to share my screen now with everybody. Have a look. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. And I am so disappointed I didn't get to come to Slovakia. That was really a thing that I was looking forward to this year. I was on a ship in Antarctica when the pandemic started to spread across the world, and the thought of this conference not happening was actually one of the first things that came into my head on my trip back. I'm just going to talk very briefly. I'm sure I don't need to explain very much about plastic to this particular audience. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing and then really give you a chance to ask any questions back to me. But I'm going to start by showing a very short video of the year-long expedition that I've just finished, traveling from the Arctic in the far north to the Antarctic in the far south on board one of our ships, the Greenpeace ship Esperanza. So I will play this now. So that was really the sum of a year's worth of work and many years before that planning. And we set off on that expedition because increasingly the science is very clear. that we have to start putting large areas of the ocean off limits to humans, both to stop the overfishing that is going on and stop the exploitation of the natural resources in the sea, but also to make the ocean more resilient to threats like climate change and like plastic. So now I'll just focus a bit on plastic and why this focus on plastic. And it all really begins with the plastic bag, that object you see on the screen in front of you. So the plastic bag in the 1960s was developed as the first mass-produced cheap plastic object. And at the time, it was this incredible innovation. It was safe, it was lightweight, it was durable, it was hygienic, and it was very, very cheap. And little did they know that 60 years later, we would be seeing plastic absolutely everywhere on this planet. So like I said, I just came back from Antarctica, but I've been sailing with Greenpeace now for around 8 years, leading expeditions to some of the furthest parts of the world. And one of my most distinct memories of plastic pollution was at this iceberg on the screen in front of you. So we were in a place called the Weddell Sea. The Weddell Sea is the coldest sea on the planet. It's to the eastern side of the Antarctic Peninsula, and it is a phenomenal place. It's so cold that the fish have a natural antifreeze in their blood. The main thing that you know about the Weddell Sea when you're there is how remote it is. You are so far away from any other humans. I remember one night going up to the bridge to talk with the captain of the ship, and we were speaking, and I had a look on the satellite radar, and what I could see was that in this huge ocean, more than 2 million square kilometers, there was us and one other ship, a very long way away. And we were so remote. And one night we came across this iceberg here, and we decided to go around it to get pictures of the penguins, to see it in the sunset. And as we went round it in our ship, what we saw on the other side was 3 huge plastic fishing buoys. So the big plastic balls that you see from the fishing industry. There is no fishing in the Weddell Sea. So this must have traveled from thousands of miles away to get to that part of the ocean. And despite having worked on plastic for many years, despite having sailed in many parts of the world, it was still a moment of realizing just how much we have already changed our planet. While we were down there, we were also testing for microplastics, tiny fragments of plastic in the ice and in the snow. So this was me on top of an iceberg in the Weddell Sea. We found plastic in 90% of all of our samples. Again, the Weddell Sea, it's impossible to comprehend that human activity has touched this place because so few people have ever gone there, and yet we found it everywhere. We even found it in freshly fallen snow. So that snow the plastic had been carried over in the clouds and then snowed down on top of the ice. So why are we finding it everywhere? Well, this chart really helps understand it a little bit. It's because when plastic gets into the ocean, different kinds of plastic sink, or they float, or they stay somewhere in the middle, and they just get transported absolutely everywhere. So we've even found it in the frozen Arctic ice. We have just been in the Arctic this week, and we've been finding plastics in all of the samples that we have been taking. We've found it in all of the tropical environments that we go to as well, where it can have additional impacts like damaging the infrastructure, creating beach pollution that mean that tourists no longer want to go to these places. So it's having a direct impact on many communities on the front line of environmental destruction as well. And of course, one of the main bits of plastic that we see everywhere is that coming from fishing waste. And yes, this is not done on purpose. Fishermen don't want to lose their gear, but when fishing net stays in the ocean, it stays there for tens, maybe even hundreds of years, and it continues to fish, trapping ocean life in it. We continue to find it everywhere on the seabed as well. Last year, we sent a submarine down to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean to a place called the Lost City, which is where hydrothermal vents, they are these amazing underwater geysers, a bit like underwater volcanoes with hot thermal springs. And we were finding plastic there as well. And this, of course, is only the plastic that we can see. Beneath the microscope, as in this picture, we are finding microplastics in more and more abundance everywhere that we look. And this is particularly concerning because these microplastics can act as a magnet for other kinds of toxins. So as well as being damaging to the fish who eat them, they may also be toxic and enter into the food chain that way, perhaps even ending up on our plate. So after all of that quite depressing news, I have to say that there is also a lot of reason for hope, because I've worked on environment issues for nearly 15 years, and I've never worked on a campaign like plastics that has moved so quickly. Around the world, we have seen governments take action to ban microbeads, for example. We've seen the European Union put in place legislation for a circular economy. Now, these laws do not go far enough. There is still far more to be done, but speed is definitely something that is quite unusual in environmental campaigning, and we are seeing politicians and companies sit up and take notice. We're seeing the media very much on our side. You know, the recent stuff around single-use masks for coronavirus, or all of the additional packaging from the pandemic. We're seeing that newspapers are on our side and calling for more reusables. So we have to take advantage of this. And there are news stories always emerging on plastics that I hope are going to help us in our campaign to stop single-use plastic. Its impact, its cost to the economy, its cost to our health, and its cost to the climate. These are three new areas opening up on plastic that I think we have to keep a close eye on. So I'm aware that I'm probably going over time slightly, so I'm going to stop there by saying that we all have a responsibility to do what we can on plastic. And the only reason that politicians and companies are sitting up and taking notice is because the public are calling on them to do that. So I hope if there's something that you take away from this conference, it's that energy and the inspiration to write letters to companies, to write letters to politicians, to pick up the phone, to talk to your neighbors, and get as many people as possible involved in the fight against single-use plastic. So I will stop there now and invite any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Honestly, it always makes me very sad, and it really touched me when I see all this plastic pollution around the world. And thank you again what you have been doing with this, because it's a huge issues we have been facing for decades, and necessary it's needed to be solved and done something. You said it many times, and you definitely will agree with me, like everything is linked on this planet. So when we are talking about plastic pollution, we have to also say something about climate crisis, and it works from the opposite way as well, because these issues have something in common: human beings and our behavior and bad habits, right? I would like to maybe ask you, before we get some questions from the audience we can go through, where maybe do you see the plastic pollution as a issue's priority this year, right? Do you think the huge step forward has been done, or where do you see the plastic pollution this year as a huge topic?
I think this year it's really got to do with coronavirus and the rapid increase in single-use plastic that we see as a response to the pandemic. I know, for example, in the UK, we're finding that single-use masks are being found absolutely everywhere, in rivers, on beaches. And we're also seeing, of course, the political space for talking about plastic is massively reduced, because all that politicians are thinking about is the pandemic. So I think right now our priority is making sure that politicians understand single-use plastic is not the only response. Reusables are perfectly safe, and we have received a letter signed by many hundreds of medical professionals asserting that there is no reason why single-use plastic is the only response. But also we need to make sure that as we come out of the pandemic and as the political space opens up for more debate, that we take advantage of that and make sure that we are communicating as much as possible to say that we cannot lose the momentum that we gained over the last 5 years.
Yeah, you said it already, like plastic has their own benefits for people, you know, because it's very easy to use it. It's very hygienic as well. But as we know already, it's out of control due to constant growing of population, unstoppable consumption, business, and constant growth model of our economy as well. And obviously we have been taught like to use it every day. And we know as well that we use something which never breaks down, actually. May I kindly ask you some very maybe honestly, when and how did you change your behavior and bad habits when it comes to plastic pollution?
So certainly I was working on plastic before I really started changing what I was doing. And it was when I was researching my book that I started to realize that there were so many solutions out there that we could all be doing. I think there are probably two main ways that I have changed my behavior. One is that I try to be a lot more organized with the food and drink that I consume. So in the UK, for example, we use 11 billion items of single-use plastic every single year just in eating lunch and coffees on the go. So if you can just make sure that you are more prepared when you leave the house, you can be a part of cutting that enormous amount of plastic use. Another thing I think that changed in my behavior was the willingness to talk to businesses, even if they're just a small cafe, even if they're just a small shop. If they're using unnecessary plastic, often it's because the owner of that business has not thought about it. It's not because they want to do a bad thing, it's just because they haven't considered that they are part of the problem. And I think being willing to have that conversation just one-on-one, very informally, without pointing the finger and saying you are doing something wrong, but instead saying, have you thought about changing whether or not you really need a plastic coffee stirrer, or whether or not you really need to plastic bag every single individual item. And I think being able to have those conversations as much as we can starts to build the number of people who care about this problem.
Yeah, I got a question from the audience. I was going to ask the same. Do you think that we can convince all people to change, or will it require a restriction or government side? So do you really think, is there any chance to change our behavior and habits from the politics side as well?
I think the only way we will get out of this problem is with the politics and the restrictions, because that is ultimately the only long-term solution to this. However, the only way we will get politicians to change is by showing that we care as individuals and that we actually want this change. There is a great signal you can send to the politics by acting as an individual, and that's where the two link up for me. So I don't think it is either or. I think the actions that we do as individuals can help influence the politics.
Yeah, what really concerns me a lot when honestly, I haven't read your book yet, but I saw an interview when you were talking about what makes you really sad. And I remember you saying, like, seeing animals feeding their chicks, for example, with microplastic is something very overwhelming. I saw many, many videos and pictures with that, and I can't believe that it's really reality, you know, to see this unnatural process when it comes to animals, for example. So what we can do with that, because it's really sad, but how we can, you know, influence all this process when it comes to, for example, this food chain, different behavior.
I think you're right, this is incredibly sad. And for me, what's very sad about it is that we probably can't change that. You know, there is already so much plastic out there that for many years to come, we will continue to see these images. We will continue to observe how we have impacted the environment. And the idea that we will be able to clean it all up and return back to the perfect world that maybe we had before isn't a reality. And we maybe it's a distraction to start saying, let's clean everything up that is already out there, because unless we turn off the tap at the source and stop producing more, the problem will just replace itself within another month or another year or another 2 years. So really all of our focus, I think, has to be on not letting the problem get even worse, not letting it get out of hand. And that's why for me, it's most important that we look at these photos, we feel the sadness, we feel the impact, and we are concerned about it, but we channel our energy and our time into making sure that we stop producing any more, because that is ultimately, if we don't do that, this problem is just going to keep on coming back and coming back and coming back.
Yeah, when it comes to your prophecy, if I can say that, to fighting this plastic pollution issues, I got a question about it. Do you, as a Greenpeace, collaborate with the ocean cleanup if you collaborate together? And do you believe it could be the partial answer to the ocean plastic problem, the collaboration between Greenpeace and ocean cleanup, for example?
I think that they are an important part of the solution, and they have done some great work in raising awareness, in particular, about the scale of plastic pollution. But I think in terms of where energy should be focused, like I said, for me, cleanup is not the best place. It's fantastic that there are engineers and problem solvers who are working with ocean cleanup to deal with this. But I think as campaigners, as people and concerned citizens, for example, if you arrive home and your house is flooding because you have left the shower on, you don't reach for the mop to clean up all the water first. You run upstairs and you turn off the tap for the shower. And I feel like what ocean cleanup is doing is more at getting the mop to clean up the water before we turn off the tap. So as scientists, as engineers, I think what ocean cleanup do is fantastic, and they should definitely carry on doing it. If you're more interested, as I am, in campaigning and changing the politics to stop the problem getting any worse, it's more important to focus on the source.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I would like to end with something more positive and with some positive ideas. So I will maybe end this conversation with do you really, what do you think about the recent progress in technology and news about various enzymes, for example, being able to decompose plastic? So can we be hopeful about this kind of solution to fight this problem?
I think we can be hopeful in the long term. And I know some of the scientists who work on these bits of research, but when I speak to these scientists, they are very clear with me that this is 10 years away, at least. So I think that it is hopeful that in the future we could develop technologies that clean the world up. But I have to bring us back to 10 years is a long time. We can produce a lot more plastic in 10 years. So the fight is now to stop all of that extra plastic being produced. But yeah, I do think that there is hope in some of these technologies. And I think that there are some amazingly clever engineers and scientists out there working their very hardest to get us out of this mess.
Totally last thing in the end, Will, could you please just set some message you would like to share with audience, what we can do or what we can change right now, or at least tomorrow, when it comes to this plastic pollution and our maybe behavior and bad habits? What would you say? What would you recommend?
Absolutely. So I think what I always say is there are the top 4 things that I think anyone can do, which is no more plastic bags, no more single-use coffee cups, no more plastic bottles, and no more straws, because they are so easy. And yet these are the objects we see everywhere, all around the world. And maybe for a coronavirus special, I say get a reusable mask as well if you are wearing a mask when you go outside. But the most important and also the most fun and the thing that will motivate you to keep on going is to talk to people about why you are doing it and explain to businesses why you have brought your own bag, because that is the thing that will make the change. And that is also the thing that continues to give you the motivation to do these things.
Well, thank you very much again and again for you have been doing, and definitely crossing fingers for everything what is ahead of you. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you.
Thank you.
Again.
Lovely to meet you. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye then.
Bye.